When did you regret judging a book by its cover? I was a sophomore when Malik, the class clown, returned after missing the first half of the year. The entire class went dead quiet when he walked in. That's the psycho who put a teacher in the hospital, someone whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. The whole room shifted away from him like he was contagious. That day, he sat alone in the cafeteria with empty seats forming a circle around him. I tried to walk over and sit nearby, but my friend grabbed my shoulder. Don't. He'll beat you up too. Kid's got serious anger issues. I watched Malik for the next few weeks and saw how everyone treated him like a ticking bomb. Teachers kept him after class to check in, but really to intimidate him. During PE, coach made him sit out contact sports. Security guards followed him between classes. But I noticed things others missed. He'd walk behind girls heading to the parking lot after dark, keeping distance but making sure they got to their cars safe. He always had extra pens and never said no when someone needed one. But no one ever thanked him. They just took what they needed while avoiding eye contact. Everything changed the day I stayed late for drama club. I was vaping in the corner of the room where there's no security camera when Mr. Akaka appeared in the doorway. "Working hard?" he asked, stepping into the room. "Just finishing up," I said, hiding my vape in my sleeve. "Don't rush off." He moved closer, blocking my path to the door. "I've been meaning to talk to you about your audition. You've got real potential." My heart started racing, but I tried to stay calm. "Thanks. I really should get going, though." He pulled me toward center stage. "You're too stiff. Too nervous." "I'm fine. I need to go." I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "You want that lead role, don't you?" His other hand moved to my lower back. "I could give you private coaching, one-on-one sessions. I've helped other girls. Excel." The way he said excel made my skin crawl. His hand slid lower. "Please, I need to." "Shh." He pulled me against him. "This is how you command the stage. How you get directors to notice you." His breath hit my neck. "I've been watching you, Luna. You're special, but you need guidance." I tried to push him away, but he was stronger. "Stop, please." "Let her go." Malik stood in the doorway, his entire body tense. His voice was controlled, but I could see his fists clenched at his sides. Kaka didn't release me. If anything, his grip tightened. "We're rehearsing. This is a closed practice." I said let her go. Malik took a step forward. "Now." Kaka finally released me, but kept himself between me and the door. "Careful, Malik. We all know what happens when you lose your temper. Wouldn't want another incident." Malik took my hand and guided me towards the principal's office. But Principal Walker barely looked up from his computer. "Mr. Akaka has directed our plays for 12 years. Are you sure you didn't misinterpret?" "He had her trapped. He was touching her," Malik said. Walker turned to me. "Drama can be emotional. Sometimes teachers use physical guidance." Then he looked at Malik. "Given your history, I understand why you might see aggression where none exists. Maybe you should take another break from school." Malik's face flushed. "This isn't about that. This is about—" "That's enough," Walker cut him off. "Unless you have proof, I suggest you both stop making accusations that could ruin a good man's career." He leaned back in his chair. "Luna, you were vaping on school property. That's a 3-day suspension. Malik, consider this your only warning." I didn't see Malik for 2 days after that. When he finally came back, something had changed. I was walking to lunch when I heard laughter echoing through the hallway. A crowd had gathered around someone's phone. "Yo, Psycho's famous!" someone shouted. On the screen was a meme of Malik on the secret school meme page. Someone had edited together security footage of Malik walking through hallways, adding horror movie music. The caption read, "When the school shooter comes back from suspension." It had 100 likes. I found him after school behind the gym, sitting on the ground with his head in his hands. After 10 minutes, he looked up. His eyes were red. "Malik, what really happened? Why were you gone for half the year?" "I never attacked some random teacher. It was about my sister." He stared at his thumbs like he was debating whether or not to continue. "I was bringing her insulin one day when I couldn't find her in the music room." His voice dropped. "So I checked Mr. Carlson's office. He taught history but also coached wrestling." He paused. The door was cracked open. I heard her crying, begging him to stop. His fists clenched. He had her pinned against his desk. His hand was up her skirt. She was 14. "Oh my." I pulled him off her and yeah, I broke his jaw. But I was too late. "What do you mean?" I was then interrupted by him breaking into tears. "She's 14 and 6 months pregnant." The color drained from my face. "Which teacher was it?" "Carlson." I pulled my phone from my pocket without answering and opened my notes app. My thumbs moved fast across the screen, typing everything while his voice still echoed in my head. "Sister 14, insulin delivery, music room empty, checked Carlson's office, door cracked, heard crying, begging to stop, pinned against desk, hand up skirt, pulled him off, broke his jaw, too late, 6 months pregnant now." I added the date Malik came back to the school, the date he disappeared mid-year, everything I could remember about the rumors and whispers. Malik watched me type with red eyes that looked confused and maybe a little scared. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. I kept typing, adding details about how security followed him, how teachers treated him like a threat, how everyone believed he was violent without knowing why. I'm writing it all down, I said, before I forget anything or get details mixed up. Dates, names, everything you told me. He wiped his face with his sleeve. What are you going to do with that? I stopped typing and looked at him. I don't know yet, but having it written down feels important. Like the first step toward something, even if I'm not sure what that something is. He nodded slowly and stared at the ground between his feet. My phone showed 3 full pages of notes. I saved it and created a backup copy, then another one that I emailed to myself. The documentation felt real and solid in a way that just remembering didn't. That night, I lay in bed staring at my ceiling until midnight passed. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the drama room with Kaka's hands on me, his breath on my neck, his body blocking the door. I grabbed my phone and opened a new note. My fingers shook as I typed, but I forced myself to write everything. How I was vaping in the corner with no camera. How he appeared in the doorway and moved closer. The exact words he said about my audition and potential. How he grabbed me and pulled me toward center stage. His hand on my lower back sliding lower. The way he said excel that made my skin crawl. His grip tightening when I tried to pull away. One-on-one sessions and private coaching. How he pulled me against him. His breath hitting my neck. I've been watching you, Luna. You're special. You need guidance. How I tried to push him away, but he was stronger. Writing it out made my stomach hurt, but also made it feel less like something I imagined. The details were concrete now, saved in my phone with a timestamp. I backed it up 3 times before I finally fell asleep around 2 in the morning. The next morning, I walked through the hallways watching everything differently. A security guard positioned himself near Malik's locker before first period started. I opened my notes app and logged the time and location. During passing period, I saw Mr. Logan, the English teacher, stop Malik and ask where he was headed with this tone that suggested he didn't trust the answer. I documented that too. Coach Peters watched Malik walk past the gym entrance and said something to another teacher that made them both look in his direction. I typed it all out with timestamps. By lunch, I had 12 separate entries showing a pattern of constant surveillance and suspicion, disguised as checking in or keeping students safe. Nobody watched other kids like this. Just Malik. I created a new folder on my phone called Evidence and moved all my documentation there. In drama class, Kaka stood at the front of the room announcing winter production auditions like nothing had happened. He talked about the show with his usual energy, gesturing and making jokes that got people laughing. When his eyes swept across the room and landed on me, he smiled. Not a threatening smile exactly, but one that felt like we shared a secret. Like he thought what happened in that room was just between us and I'd never tell anyone. My stomach turned over. He kept talking about audition requirements and rehearsal schedules while I sat frozen in my seat. He thinks he got away with it. The thought made me so angry I had to grip my desk to stay still. He moved on to someone else and I pulled out my phone under my desk, adding this moment to my notes. His confidence, his smile, how he acted completely normal. That afternoon, I texted my friend that I felt sick and couldn't make drama club. First time I'd ever skipped. Instead, I sat in my car in the parking lot with my phone, searching Title IX policies and student rights. I found the district website and clicked through pages about harassment and discrimination. There was supposed to be a coordinator who handled these complaints separately from the school administration, someone outside Walker's control. I wrote down the name, Nora Hammond, and her email address. I read through procedures and timelines and something called interim measures. The language was formal and hard to understand, but I kept reading, taking notes on my phone about reporting options and what counted as retaliation. The next day, Malik got called to the principal's office during lunch. I heard people whispering immediately that he was in trouble again, that he probably did something violent, that Walker was finally going to expel him. I waited by his locker after school until he appeared looking tired and angry. I asked what happened, and he said Walker just wanted to check in on his adjustment. But the way he said adjustment made it clear that wasn't really what the meeting was about. Walker kept mentioning Malik's second chance and how important it was not to waste opportunities, and how the school was watching to make sure he stayed on track. Threats, but dressed up as concern. Malik's jaw was tight when he told me. I added it to my evidence folder with the date and time. I needed to talk to someone who might actually help. Mrs. Stewart, the school counselor, had always seemed genuinely kind when I'd seen her in the halls. She wasn't part of Walker's inner circle of administrators. I logged into the office system and made an appointment, marking it as academic stress so nobody would ask questions about what I really wanted to discuss. The earliest slot was 2 days away. I took it. When I finally sat across from Miss I. Stewart in her small office, she told me to call her Ain. She had this calm way of listening that made me feel like I could actually tell her everything. So I did. I described what Kaka did to me in the drama room, every detail I'd written in my notes, how he cornered me and touched me and said those things about private coaching, how Malik intervened and probably saved me from worse. Then I told her about Malik's sister and what Carlson did, and how Malik broke his jaw trying to protect her. Ain's face went pale as I talked, but she didn't interrupt or tell me to stop. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she explained carefully that she was a mandated reporter. That meant she had legal obligations that limited what she could keep confidential. Her voice was gentle, but I could tell she was being very precise with her words. Ain pulled out a notepad and wrote down a name and phone number. Nora Hammond, she said, District Title IX Coordinator. Going through her might offer more protection from retaliation than staying within the school's chain of command. She explained the difference between mandatory reporting to child services, which she had to do for Malik's sister, and filing a formal Title IX complaint about staff misconduct, which was separate. Title IX was federal law about discrimination and harassment in schools. Hammond had authority that Walker didn't control. Ain kept writing, giving me information about interim measures and no-contact directives and investigation procedures. I took the paper with Hammond's contact information and folded it carefully into my pocket. For the first time since the drama room, I felt like maybe there was actually a path forward that didn't involve just staying quiet and hoping everyone forgot. I looked at Ain and asked her straight out if she thought Walker would get back at me for reporting Kaka. She went quiet for a long time, long enough that I could hear the clock on her wall ticking. When she finally spoke, she said she couldn't predict what he'd do, but that punishing someone for reporting harassment was itself breaking Title IX rules. The way she said it, so careful with every word, told me exactly what she really meant. The system might protect me on paper, but Walker had ways of making my life harder that wouldn't look like punishment on the surface. I thanked her and left her office with Hammond's contact information folded in my pocket, and a sick feeling in my stomach about what came next. I needed to find Malik. I checked his usual spots and finally saw him sitting on the bleachers by the football field, earbuds in, staring at nothing. I climbed up and sat next to him until he noticed me and pulled out one earbud. I told him about Ain and about Hammond, the District Title IX person who might actually help. Then I asked if he'd be willing to include his sister's situation in a complaint about how the school protects bad teachers instead of students. He looked at me for a second, then shook his head. He said he needed to talk to his sister first because it was her story to tell, not his. I got it immediately. Just because something happened to someone you love doesn't mean you get to decide when or how to talk about it. I told him that made sense and that I'd wait to hear what she said. 2 days went by before my phone buzzed with a text from Malik. His sister wasn't ready to come forward publicly yet. The words sat there on my screen and I felt this mix of understanding and anger. She was okay with him sharing some basic information about Carlson if it helped stop him from hurting other kids, but she didn't want to be part of any official process. I texted back that I respected that and meant it, but I also felt so tired of how the system works. Victims have to relive the worst moments of their lives just to maybe create change, and even then there's no promise anything will actually happen. I sat on my bed that night and opened my laptop. The email to Hammond took me 3 hours to write. I described everything that happened in the drama room with Kaka, every single detail I could remember. The exact date, the time, how he blocked the door, what he said about private coaching, where his hands went, how Malik had to physically intervene. I wrote it all in the most basic, factual way I could, like I was writing a police report. Then before I finished, I added a paragraph about Malik's situation. I didn't use his sister's name or give details she hadn't approved, but I explained how Carlson assaulted a 14-year-old student, how Malik protected her and got suspended for it, and how Carlson just quietly resigned and probably moved to another school. I wrote that this looked like a pattern of the administration covering up abuse instead of stopping it. The next day during my free period, the office called me down. Ain was waiting in her room and closed the door behind me. She said she needed to warn me about something. Filing this complaint would probably make my senior year much harder. Teachers talk to each other. Walker has friends on staff. Drama opportunities would likely disappear. She said it gently, like she was trying to prepare me without scaring me off. I looked at her and said I already lost those opportunities the moment I walked into that drama room alone with Kaka. She nodded slowly, and I could tell she understood. That night, I sat in bed with my laptop open, the email to Hammond ready to send. It was 11:47 p.m. when I finally hit the button. Then immediately I panicked and opened my sent folder to reread it. I checked it 17 times, looking for any mistakes or anything that could be used against me. Every time I read it, I found something I wished I'd said differently, or worried that I'd said too much. The waiting for a response felt worse than writing the whole thing had been. Hammond emailed back within 24 hours. I was in history class when my phone buzzed in my pocket, and I had to wait until passing period to check it. She wanted to meet at the district office instead of at the school. Her message was professional, but somehow also warm, saying she took these allegations seriously and wanted to hear my full account in a setting where we could talk privately. She gave me 3 possible times and said to bring a parent or supportive adult if I wanted. The morning before my meeting with Hammond, I walked past the drama room and saw a crowd around the bulletin board. I pushed through to see what everyone was looking at. The cast list for the winter production was posted. I scanned through it once, then again, then a third time. My name wasn't anywhere. Not in the leads, not in the supporting roles, not even in the ensemble. I'd been completely cut. Kaka had posted a note at the bottom about casting decisions being based on professionalism and commitment to the program. Everyone standing there knew exactly what that meant. I was punished. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and took a screenshot of the cast list and Kaka's note. I opened the folder on my phone I'd labeled evidence and added them to the growing collection. Every time they came after me for reporting what happened, they just made my case stronger. It still hurt, though, seeing my name missing from that list when I'd worked so hard at auditions. The district office was in a building 20 minutes from the school, a boring concrete place that looked like every other government building. Hammond's office was on the second floor. She turned out to be younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with straight dark hair and this direct way of talking that made me trust her right away. She shook my hand and offered me water, then sat across from me with a notepad. She explained the Title IX process step by step, how long investigations usually take, what interim measures meant, what a no-contact directive actually did in practice. She used simple language and checked in constantly to make sure I understood. When she explained that interim measures were temporary protections put in place right away while the investigation happened, I felt this small bit of relief that maybe I wouldn't have to see Kaka every day while waiting for some final decision that might take months. I took a breath and started from the beginning, walking Nora through every detail of what happened in the drama room. I described how Kaka positioned himself between me and the door, how his hands moved from my shoulders to my lower back, how his breath felt on my neck when he pulled me close. Nora's pen moved steadily across her notepad, her face calm and professional, but I watched her jaw muscles tighten when I got to the part about him saying he'd been watching me. I told her about going to Walker's office with Malik, about how Walker dismissed everything as misinterpretation and suspended me for vaping instead of investigating Kaka. I explained about the cast list posted after I filed my complaint, how my name was completely missing with Kaka's note about professionalism and commitment. Nora wrote down the date of the cast list posting, the exact wording of Kaka's note, Walker's specific phrases about drama being emotional and teachers using physical guidance. She asked clarifying questions about timeline and whether anyone else was present, and I gave her every detail I could remember. Nora set down her pen and explained that she would need to interview other students and collect evidence, which meant people at the school would know I filed a complaint even though the process was supposed to be confidential. She asked if I wanted interim measures while the investigation happened, schedule changes so I wouldn't have classes near Kaka, a no-contact order requiring him to stay away from me, different supervision for any drama activities. I said yes to everything she offered, feeling this small bit of relief that maybe I wouldn't have to see him every day while waiting months for some final decision. When I mentioned Malik's sister and what Carlson did to her, Nora's whole expression changed. Her face went harder, more focused, like she'd just connected pieces she'd been looking for. She explained that if Carlson was currently working at another school in the district, she had authority to investigate his conduct even though he wasn't at my campus anymore. But she'd need either the victim's cooperation or at least permission to include the case in her investigation. She couldn't force a 14-year-old pregnant girl to relive her trauma just to build a case. I understood that, even though part of me wanted every piece of evidence possible to show the pattern of how this school protected predators. After the meeting, I sat in my car in the district office parking lot and texted Malik. I explained about Nora and the investigation and asked if his sister might be willing to talk to Ain about support options, with no pressure to participate in anything formal. He texted back 20 minutes later saying he'd talk to her. The goal was giving her resources and control over her own story, not pushing her toward actions that might hurt her more. Back at the school the next day, I noticed Kaka watching me during the passing period between third and fourth period. He was standing near the main hallway intersection, not quite in my path, but close enough that I had to see him. His expression wasn't angry or threatening. It was calculating, like he was trying to figure out what I was planning or what I'd already done. I kept my face blank and pulled out my phone as soon as I turned the corner, typing a note with the date, time, location, and what I observed. I started a new document in my phone labeled Kaka Sightings and added it to my evidence folder. At lunch, a junior I barely knew approached my table. Jasper Flores ran the school newspaper and had this intense way of looking at you like he was analyzing everything you said. He asked if I'd noticed the pattern in the meme page posts about Malik. I said I'd seen some of them but hadn't been tracking them closely. He pulled out his phone and showed me a spreadsheet with columns for post times, engagement rates, and the accounts that consistently liked and shared the most vicious content. He'd been documenting every anti-Malik post for weeks, tracking which accounts interacted with them and how quickly they spread. Jasper explained he was investigating the meme page for a story about cyberbullying and institutional responsibility. He'd noticed that several accounts engaging heavily with anti-Malik content also followed school administrator accounts. It wasn't proof that administrators were involved or encouraging the harassment, but the correlation was suspicious enough to pursue. Some of the accounts that liked every school shooter meme also liked posts from the official school athletics account, the official principal's account, the school security account. The overlap was too consistent to be random. I made a decision to trust him with part of my story, not the assault details, not anything that would identify me before I was ready, but the general pattern of how the school retaliated against students who reported staff misconduct, how they protected certain teachers by transferring them instead of firing them, how they punished victims for speaking up while the adults who hurt them faced no real consequences. Jasper listened carefully, asking specific questions about timeline and documentation. He said he'd heard similar stories from other students, but no one had been willing to go on record. Everyone was too afraid of retaliation, or too convinced nothing would change anyway. 3 days later, Principal Walker called me to his office. The summons came through a hall monitor during English class, saying Walker wanted to see me for a professionalism discussion about my attitude in recent weeks. It was obviously retaliation, but hard to prove since he could claim any reason for wanting to meet with a student. I remembered what Ain taught me about my rights, and asked if I could bring a supportive adult to the meeting. Walker's expression went sour over the phone, but he agreed, setting the meeting for the next morning. Ain sat beside me in Walker's office, her notepad open on her lap and her pen ready. Walker spent 20 minutes lecturing me about respecting teachers and not spreading rumors that could damage careers. He said students sometimes misinterpret normal interactions and turn them into accusations that ruin good people's lives. He talked about how important it was to think carefully before making claims that could have serious consequences. When he used the word defamation, Ain interrupted him. Her voice stayed calm but firm as she clarified that I had a legal right to report misconduct without being labeled a liar. That filing a complaint wasn't defamation. That retaliation against students who report harassment was itself a violation of Title IX. Walker's face flushed, but he backed down slightly with Ain there taking notes on everything he said. Walker stood up, signaling the meeting was over. I grabbed my backpack and followed Ain out into the hallway where fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. She walked me to the counseling office without saying much, but once we got inside and she closed the door, she pulled out a business card. It had Nora Hammond's direct phone number written on the back in blue ink. Ain told me to expect a call from Nora within the next day or two about next steps. I shoved the card in my pocket and headed to third period, already 10 minutes late. 2 days later, I got pulled out of English class by a student aide who handed me a sealed envelope from the district office. Inside was a single page on official letterhead stating that Mr. Kaka had been issued a no-contact directive effective immediately. The letter said he couldn't talk to me directly, couldn't be alone with me, and had to communicate through other staff if necessary. It didn't explain why, but it didn't need to. By lunch, everyone in drama knew something had gone down. I could feel people staring at me in the cafeteria, whispering behind their hands. 3 different girls approached me that week in bathrooms and empty hallways, always when no one else was around. The first one was a senior named Becca, who caught me by my locker after school. She said Kaka had made comments about her body during rehearsals last year, stuff about how she filled out her costume. Nothing she could report, she said, but enough to make her uncomfortable every single practice. The second girl was a sophomore in my biology class. She told me Kaka had asked her to stay late to work on blocking, just the 2 of them, and when she said she had to catch her bus, he'd gotten annoyed and cut her stage time for the rest of the production. The third was a junior who didn't give me details, just said she believed me, and that she was glad someone finally said something, but none of them would make formal statements. They were too scared of what it would do to their college applications, their recommendations, their reputations. I understood that fear because I was living it too, but part of me wished I wasn't fighting this alone. Malik found me behind the gym again on Thursday. Same spot where he'd told me about his sister. He looked less tense than usual, almost relieved. He said his sister had met with Ain twice now and agreed to see a counselor outside the school system. Ain had connected her with someone who works with teenagers dealing with assault and pregnancy. It wasn't going to fix what Carlson did, Malik said, and it wouldn't make him face any real punishment, but at least his sister was getting help. That felt like something, even if it was small. I asked if his sister might ever be willing to file a formal complaint, and Malik shook his head. She just wanted to get through this pregnancy and graduate and never think about Carlson again. I couldn't blame her for that. That same afternoon, I sat in the school library with my laptop and filled out a public records request form that Nora had emailed me. The template asked for any complaints, disciplinary actions, or internal communications involving Kaka and Carlson. I had to mail it to the district office with a copy to the school board, and they had 30 days to respond. Nora had warned me they'd probably redact most of it, or claim certain documents were protected, but having a paper trail mattered. It showed I was serious and that I wasn't going away. I printed 2 copies, signed them both, and dropped them in the mailbox outside the post office on my way home. The next day, Jasper caught me in the hallway between classes and asked if I had a few minutes. We ended up in the library again, sitting at a table in the back corner where nobody goes. He pulled up a document on his laptop, an article about the meme page, and how anonymous platforms let people harass other students without consequences. He'd written it carefully, never naming Malik or anyone specific, but talking about patterns and how administrators could step in but choose not to. Requested Reads is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. He asked if I'd read it for accuracy, and I did, scrolling through 3 pages of solid reporting. I suggested he add a line about how this kind of harassment often targets students who speak up about staff misconduct, and he nodded and typed it in right there. 2 days later, Kaka posted on the drama department's Instagram page. It was a long message about false rumors hurting the program and destroying the arts community. He wrote about how much he'd sacrificed for his students over the years, and how disappointed he was that people would try to tear down everything he'd built. He didn't name me, but he didn't have to. Within an hour, my phone was exploding with texts from classmates asking what happened, if the rumors were true, if I was okay. Some messages were supportive, but others accused me of lying for attention or ruining drama for everyone else. I wanted to defend myself, to explain what really happened, but I remembered what Nora had told me during our meeting. Don't discuss the case on social media. Don't respond to messages from other students about it. Anything I said could be used against me later, twisted into something it wasn't. So I left every message on read and turned off my notifications. The silence felt like weakness, like I was letting Kaka control the story. But I kept reminding myself that his public defensiveness actually helped my case. People don't write long defensive posts unless they're worried about something. On Monday, I was eating lunch with Malik in our usual corner of the cafeteria when two security guards approached our table. One of them, the tall guy who always wears sunglasses inside, told Malik they needed to check his phone for inappropriate content. Malik asked what content they were talking about, and the guard just repeated that they needed to see his phone. Malik pulled out the student handbook from his backpack, flipped to a page he'd marked with a sticky note, and read aloud the section about unreasonable search and seizure. He said they needed specific reasonable suspicion of a policy violation, not just a general request to search his property. The guard's face went red, but he backed off and said they'd be logging this as Malik being uncooperative with security protocols. Malik just shrugged and went back to his sandwich. That night, I opened the Notes app on my phone and created a new document called Evidence Timeline. I started writing down everything I could remember from the past few weeks. Every time Kaka was in the same hallway as me, even though the no-contact directive said he should avoid me. Every comment from other teachers about my situation, the weird looks, the sudden coldness from staff who used to be friendly. Every message I got from classmates, both supportive and hostile. I included dates, times, locations, names when I knew them. I backed the whole thing up to cloud storage and set it to auto-backup every night at midnight. If this was going to be a long fight, I needed records of everything. 3 weeks later, the district sent me a fat envelope with my public records request results. Most of the emails were covered in thick black bars that hid names and details, but I could still read enough to see the pattern. At least 3 different parents had complained about Kaka over the past 4 years, all using words like uncomfortable, too friendly, and boundary issues. Each complaint got stamped with the same response at the bottom. They all said the problem was resolved through counseling and professional development, which clearly meant nothing actually changed since Kaka kept teaching, and I ended up trapped in that drama room. I took photos of every page, even the redacted ones, and added them to my evidence folder with notes about what I could see. The complaints went back further than I expected, which meant the school knew about this for years and just kept letting him work with students. That same afternoon, Jasper texted me that Walker called his advisor into the office. Miss Fleming taught journalism and supervised the school paper, and according to Jasper, Walker tried to pressure her into killing the meme page story before it went to print. Miss Fleming told Walker that student journalists have editorial independence as long as their content is factual and not libelous, which this story definitely was since Jasper had documented everything carefully. Walker apparently got mad and threatened to reconsider the newspaper's funding next year, but Miss Fleming didn't back down. She told him that threatening to defund the paper because of editorial decisions would be a First Amendment violation, and she'd be happy to discuss that with the school board if necessary. Jasper said Walker's face went red, but he dismissed Miss Fleming without actually forcing her to kill the story. It felt good knowing at least one teacher was willing to stand up to the administration, even if most of them just went along with whatever Walker wanted. The next day, one of my English teachers pulled me aside after class. He glanced around to make sure no one else was listening, then told me quietly that union protections make it really hard to fire tenured staff, even when complaints are real. He explained that teachers have contracts and representatives who fight any disciplinary action, and that the process takes months or even years if someone decides to fight back. He never said whether he believed what happened to me, but the way he was talking felt like he was trying to prepare me for Kaka not actually getting fired. He told me to focus on protecting myself rather than expecting the system to work the way it should, which was depressing but probably realistic. I thanked him for being honest, even though I didn't want to hear that Kaka might just get away with everything. Later that week, Nora emailed me with better news. She'd arranged for me to have after-hours access to the drama room, but only with Miss Fleming supervising instead of Kaka. This meant I could still work on technical theater stuff like lighting design and set construction without being alone with him or having to give up drama completely. It wasn't the same as performing or being in the productions, but it was something, and it showed the district was taking the no-contact directive seriously. I met with Miss Fleming after school to go over the schedule, and she was really nice about the whole situation. She didn't ask questions about what happened, just told me she was glad to help, and that she'd make sure I had space to work safely. Having one small piece of drama back made me feel a little less like I'd lost everything, even though I knew it was just a temporary fix until the investigation finished. A few days after that, my phone buzzed with a message from an Instagram account I didn't recognize. The account had no posts and no profile picture, just a generic username that looked random. The message included a screenshot of a text conversation between Kaka and some student whose name was blocked out. In the screenshot, Kaka was asking the student to stay after school for extra rehearsal at 8 p.m., which was way past normal activity hours when other people would be around. The students' responses were nervous, asking if other people would be there, and Kaka kept saying it would be one-on-one coaching for personalized attention. My stomach turned reading it because it sounded exactly like what he'd said to me about private coaching sessions. The anonymous account sent another message saying they couldn't come forward officially because they were scared of retaliation, but they wanted me to know I wasn't the only one. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling sick, but also relieved that I had proof this wasn't just about me. I forwarded the screenshot to Nora right away with a note explaining it came from an anonymous source who was afraid to report officially. I told her I didn't know who sent it or who the other student was, but that the conversation showed Kaka was still trying to get students alone even after my complaint. Nora wrote back within an hour saying she appreciated me sending it, and that even secondhand evidence helps establish a pattern of behavior. She said she'd been reaching out to current and former students as part of her investigation, and that several people had shared similar stories about Kaka's boundary issues. None of them wanted to file formal complaints, but their accounts were helping build the case that this was a pattern, not just one misunderstanding. Knowing other people had experienced this made me feel less alone, but it also made me angry that so many students had been uncomfortable around him for so long without anything changing. The next Monday, I was walking to lunch when I saw Malik standing near a group of seniors who were all laughing at someone's phone. I got close enough to see they were looking at another meme post about him, this one with his face photoshopped onto some violent movie character. Malik's whole body was tense and I could see his hands starting to curl into fists. I grabbed his arm before he could move toward them and pulled him away from the group. I reminded him quietly that this was exactly what they wanted, for him to lose control and prove their dangerous psycho story right. He took a deep breath and I watched his shoulders drop slightly as he forced himself to relax. Instead of confronting them, he pulled out his phone and took a quick photo of their faces and started typing notes about what they were saying. He was documenting it the same way I'd been documenting everything about Kaka, building evidence instead of reacting. We walked away together while the seniors kept laughing, not even noticing we'd been there. 2 days later, Jasper's article came out in the school paper. The headline was something like, "Anonymous Platforms and Institutional Responsibility," and the whole piece was really professional and careful. He cited research about cyberbullying and how administrators can be held liable when they know about harassment but don't stop it. He never named Malik or the meme page specifically, but he included enough details that everyone knew exactly what school and situation he was writing about. The article talked about how targeted harassment is different from general free speech, and how schools have a responsibility to protect students from hostile environments. He even quoted some legal cases about schools getting sued for ignoring online harassment. Reading it made me proud of Jasper for putting together something so solid that Walker couldn't just dismiss as gossip or drama. The backlash started almost immediately. By lunch, students were posting free speech memes and accusing Jasper of trying to censor everyone. Someone made a post saying the school paper was becoming thought police, and it got like 200 likes in an hour. Walker sent out an email to all students and parents that afternoon about supporting open dialogue and respecting diverse viewpoints, which completely missed the point about targeted harassment being different from general expression. His statement made it sound like the administration was being neutral, but really they were taking the harasser's side by acting like this was just a difference of opinion instead of bullying. Jasper texted me saying he expected the backlash, but it still sucked to see so many people defending their right to mock someone. I told him his article was good, and that the people who mattered would understand what he was trying to say. By Friday, I felt completely exhausted. I'd been documenting everything, forwarding evidence, attending meetings, and dealing with the constant stress of seeing Kaka in the hallways for weeks now. Nothing felt like it was actually changing. Kaka was still teaching, Walker was still principal, and the investigation seemed to be moving at a crawl. I went to see Aine during my free period and just told her I was tired of fighting when nothing seemed to be happening. She listened while I vented, then reminded me gently that Title IX investigations typically take months, not weeks. She explained that Nora was collecting evidence and interviewing people, and that these processes have legal requirements that take time. Aine pointed out that interim measures were already protecting me even if final outcomes hadn't arrived yet. The no-contact directive, the supervised drama access, the documentation we were building were all real things that mattered. I knew she was right, but it was hard to feel like progress was happening when every day still felt like a struggle. The email from Randolph Cole arrived Monday morning with a formal subject line about scheduling a status meeting. He wanted me, Nora, and my parents at the district office Thursday afternoon to discuss where things stood with the investigation. I forwarded it to my mom, who called me during lunch asking what investigation, and why this was the first she was hearing about district involvement. I'd told my parents some of what happened, but not everything. Not the full details about the drama room or how Walker handled it or how deep this all went. Explaining it over the phone felt wrong, so I just said we'd talk about it at the meeting and that Nora would be there to help explain the process. My mom's voice got tight in that way it does when she's trying not to freak out, and she said my dad would definitely be taking off work for this. Thursday came too fast. My parents picked me up early from the school, both of them quiet in the car, and I could feel the questions they weren't asking yet. The district office building looked like every other administrative building, all beige walls and fluorescent lights, and that weird smell of copy machines and industrial carpet cleaner. Nora met us in the lobby and shook my parents' hands, her professional smile not quite reaching her eyes. She led us to a conference room where Cole was already waiting with a leather folder and a legal pad covered in notes. He stood up when we entered, extending his hand to each of my parents with practiced sympathy. His suit was expensive, his handshake firm, and everything about him screamed lawyer, even though his title was something about risk management and compliance. We all sat down around the table, my parents on either side of me, Nora across from us, Cole at the head like he was running a board meeting. He started by thanking us for coming and expressing how seriously the district takes all allegations of staff misconduct. Then he opened his folder and the questions began. He asked when exactly the drama room incident occurred, and I gave him the date. He asked who I told immediately afterward, and I explained about going to Walker with Malik. He made a note. He asked if I had any physical evidence, any texts or emails from Kaka, any witnesses besides Malik who saw what happened. I said no to the physical evidence, yes to Malik as a witness, and explained that Kaka was careful about not leaving digital trails. Cole nodded like he expected that answer, making another note. He asked why I waited several weeks before contacting Nora instead of reporting through proper channels right away. The way he said proper channels made my stomach turn, like there was a right way to handle being assaulted and I'd done it wrong. My mom's hand found mine under the table, squeezing hard. Before I could answer, Nora leaned forward and her voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. She said delayed reporting is extremely common in sexual harassment cases and doesn't undermine credibility in any way. She explained that victims often need time to process trauma, that power dynamics make immediate reporting feel unsafe, that retaliation fears are valid and documented. She pulled out her own folder, thicker than Cole's, and started listing what she'd documented. The no-contact directive Kaka violated multiple times by positioning himself near me in hallways. The cast list retaliation that excluded me completely from the winter production, right after I filed my complaint. The public records request results showing 3 prior parental complaints about Kaka's boundary issues that were all marked resolved through counseling, that clearly didn't resolve anything. She had dates, times, witness statements, pattern evidence that supported my account even without a video recording of the assault itself. Cole's expression stayed neutral, but I saw him shift in his seat. My dad had been quiet up until then, just listening with his jaw getting tighter and tighter, but now he spoke up and asked the question I'd been afraid to voice. He wanted to know if the district was actually planning to fire Kaka, or if they were just going to transfer him to another school like they did with Carlson. Cole did that thing where adults pause before answering a question they don't want to answer, then said he couldn't discuss personnel decisions because of privacy laws and union contracts. My mom made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, more like disbelief escaping. She said that sounded like they were definitely considering just moving him somewhere else where he could do the same thing to different students. Cole started talking about due process and contractual obligations and how these situations are complicated, but my dad cut him off and said the only thing complicated here was the district choosing to protect a predator instead of students. The room got very quiet. Cole adjusted his tie and said the district takes these allegations seriously, which he'd already said at the start of the meeting, and that they were conducting a thorough investigation. After the meeting ended and Cole left the room, Nora asked my parents to stay for a minute. She closed the door and her professional mask dropped a little. She told them she'd formally recommended placing Kaka on administrative leave pending the investigation's completion. She explained that whether the district actually followed her recommendation depended on factors beyond her control, things like union agreements and legal department advice and risk calculations I didn't fully understand. But she was building the strongest case possible and pushing as hard as she could within the system's limits. My mom asked what happens if they don't fire him. If he just gets transferred, and Nora said she'd be flagging his file and reporting to state licensing authorities regardless of what the district decided. It wasn't the answer my parents wanted, but it was something. That night at dinner, I heard a rumor through a group chat that made me put my fork down and stare at my phone. Someone's older sister who worked at a middle school 2 districts over had seen Carlson there, coaching the wrestling team like nothing ever happened. I felt sick thinking about him around even younger kids, around 12 and 13-year-olds who wouldn't know to be careful, whose parents probably had no idea what he'd done at our school. I forwarded the message to Nora immediately, and she confirmed within an hour that she'd already flagged his case to that district's HR department and to state education licensing authorities. She said the wheels turned slowly, but they were turning. Malik texted me that same night saying his sister had made a decision. She wasn't ready to participate in interviews or formal proceedings. That was still too much. But she was giving Nora permission through Malik to include limited information about what Carlson did in the pattern and practice documentation. It was a compromise that respected her boundaries while still creating some accountability, and I texted back that I was proud of her for doing what felt right for her, instead of what everyone else might want. The district must have decided Nora's recommendation was too risky to ignore, because Friday afternoon Walker sent an email to all drama families. It said Mr. Kaka was taking time off for personal reasons, and that a substitute would handle the winter production. The vague language fooled exactly no one, and my phone started blowing up within minutes. Some messages were supportive, classmates thanking me privately for coming forward, and sharing their own uncomfortable experiences with Kaka that never quite crossed the line enough to report, but created this constant atmosphere of unease around him. Others were angry, blaming me for ruining drama and accusing me of lying for attention or trying to get out of trouble for vaping. The social division was exhausting, and I ended up turning off my phone for the rest of the night. Jasper published his follow-up piece about Title IX processes Monday morning. He interviewed legal experts about how harassment investigations actually work, what interim measures look like, what rights students have during these processes. He didn't mention my case specifically, but the timing made the connection obvious to anyone paying attention. Several students stopped me in the hallway to say the article helped them understand what was actually happening instead of just believing rumors. And I made a mental note to thank Jasper for using his platform to educate instead of sensationalize. The teachers' union rep showed up at a district meeting the following week, and by Friday afternoon, word had leaked through the staff grapevine that Kaka's lawyer was claiming I misunderstood his teaching methods, and that the no-contact directive was unfair punishment without proper process. I texted Nora immediately when I heard, my hands shaking as I typed, and she called me back within an hour to explain this was completely normal defense strategy. She said lawyers always try to reframe assault as misunderstanding, and that it didn't change anything about the investigation's direction or the evidence she'd already collected. Her calm voice helped, but I still felt sick knowing Kaka was out there building a defense while I just had to wait and trust the system would work. Monday morning, I opened my locker before first period, and a folded piece of notebook paper fell out onto my shoes. I picked it up and unfolded it to find block letters written in black Sharpie that said, "Drop it or lose your college recommendations." My stomach dropped and I looked around the hallway, but everyone was just walking to class like normal, nobody watching me or acting suspicious. I pulled out my phone and took 3 photos of the note from different angles, making sure the lighting was good and the words were clear, then walked straight to the office and asked to see Aine. She wasn't available, so I sat in the waiting area for 20 minutes until she came out of a meeting, and when she saw my face, she immediately brought me into her office and closed the door. I showed her the note and the photos, and she said we needed to report this to Nora right away, so she called from her office phone while I sat there trying not to cry from anger and fear mixed together. The threat was obviously from another student, probably someone who liked Kaka or thought I was causing drama for attention, but it still went into the evidence file as additional retaliation. Nora came to campus that same afternoon and sat down with me and Aine to create what she called a safety plan for all my after-school activities. She wrote down specific check-in times when I had to text Aine to confirm I was okay, and she made a rule that I couldn't be in any school building alone ever, even for 5 minutes. The plan included a list of safe adults I could contact if I felt threatened, and instructions for what to do if I saw Kaka anywhere near campus, even though he wasn't supposed to be there. The whole thing felt protective and restrictive at the same time, like I was the one losing freedom while Kaka just sat at home getting paid to do nothing. I understood why the rules existed, but I hated that speaking up meant my life got smaller and more controlled while he got a vacation. 2 days later, I was walking to my car after drama, when I saw Malik standing near the gym talking to Tyler Fleming, one of the seniors who'd shared the school shooter memes back in November. I slowed down to see if there was going to be a problem, but Malik's body language looked calm, not tense, and Tyler was doing most of the talking with his head down like he was ashamed. I got close enough to hear Tyler say he was sorry for spreading that stuff, and that he didn't really think Malik was dangerous. He just thought it was funny at the time, without considering how it felt to be on the receiving end. Malik nodded and said he accepted the apology, his voice quiet but steady, and Tyler walked away looking relieved that Malik hadn't yelled at him or worse. Later that afternoon, Malik texted me about it and said one apology doesn't undo months of isolation and fear, that forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation, and he's not required to pretend everything's fine now just because someone finally felt guilty. I texted back that he was right, and that accepting an apology doesn't mean trusting that person again or acting like the harm never happened. The district sent official notice the following Monday that Mr. Ikaka had chosen to resign for personal reasons effective immediately, with no admission of wrongdoing and a confidential settlement agreement that nobody was allowed to discuss publicly. Nora called me after school to explain what it meant in practical terms, walking me through how the district avoided a lengthy hearing process, how Kaka avoided having formal findings on his permanent record, and how I got the outcome of him being gone even if it wasn't the full accountability I wanted. She said this happens all the time in these cases because it's faster and cheaper for everyone involved, but it left me feeling relieved and angry at the same time. I was glad he couldn't hurt anyone else at our school, but furious that he could potentially apply to teach somewhere else without this incident following him officially. Nora validated both feelings when I told her, explaining the practical limits of what Title IX investigations can actually achieve within current legal systems. And then she told me she'd also filed a report with state licensing authorities that might prevent him from getting future teaching positions, though there were no guarantees about how that process would go. The Carlson situation moved forward on a separate track, with the district referring his case to law enforcement based on all the evidence Nora had compiled over the past few months. Malik's sister still wasn't participating publicly in any proceedings, which was completely her choice and her right, but the criminal investigation could proceed based on other evidence and witness statements, and she had the option to engage later if she decided to. I checked in with Malik regularly to see how he was handling everything, and he said his sister was doing better with her therapist, and that she felt less pressure now that the decision was out of her hands temporarily. Principal Walker got reassigned to a district curriculum position 3 weeks after Kaka resigned, which the official announcement described as a lateral move, but everyone understood was actually a removal from campus leadership after his mishandling of multiple complaints. The school board brought in Ms. Rodriguez as interim principal, and her first action was scheduling a series of listening sessions with students about safety and reporting procedures, which felt like actual progress instead of just empty promises. She stood in the cafeteria during lunch periods introducing herself and handing out cards with her direct email and phone number, telling students she wanted to hear about their experiences and concerns without fear of retaliation. 3 months after everything started, I found myself back in the drama room working on lighting design for the spring production under new supervision from Ms. M. Fleming, who'd stepped in to direct after Kaka left. Malik's threat assessment tag had been removed from his record completely, and he'd started eating lunch with a small group of friends instead of sitting alone. We'd also started a peer support group with Ames guidance for students navigating institutional complaints, meeting once a week after school to share resources and strategies. The outcomes weren't perfect by any measure. Kaka and Walker faced consequences but not full accountability. Carlson's case was still working through the legal system, and the social fallout from everything still lingered in hallway conversations and awkward silences. But we'd created real change that would protect future students from going through what we went through, and sometimes that has to be enough when perfect justice isn't possible. I was learning that justice in real life is complicated and incomplete, that speaking up doesn't guarantee vindication or happy endings. But that silence guarantees nothing changes at all, and I'd rather live with the complications of having fought than spend the rest of my life regretting that I stayed quiet when it mattered. And that's my side of things. Now I want to know how you'd have handled it. Seriously, I read everything. Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's see all the different perspectives. You always come through with the best ideas.